So perfection doesn't exist. I tell people all the time that if you're looking for perfection in a new house, it just doesn't exist. It's just doesn't happen. Let's begin by addressing the code compliance question that always seems to come up with new construction. Building codes are in place to provide safety for people, to protect property, um, people and property. Home inspections provide the same benefits, deficiencies, and concerns can be successfully communicated without ever mentioning the word code. Plus, in Virginia, you're prohibited from citing code. SOP, state licensing regulations require that we report defects. I think we can all agree on that. What is a defect? They're defined different ways depending on which SOP you're looking at or what state regulation you're looking at. Commonly is not functioning properly, which is an SOP in the ASHI standards. Significantly deficient also shows up in the ASHI and the Maryland SOP. Unsafe shows up in the ASHI SOP. The significantly deficient part in Maryland, actually, part of the definition of that talks about being unsafe. Imperfection, abnormality that impairs function. Quality, function, worth, or utility, or shortcoming. Guess where that shows up? That's Virginia regulation. Virginia decided not to try to define a defect, but basically there is a document that DPOR uses that's called the guidance document, and basically it relies on the definition of defect that shows up in the dictionary. It's very important that you remember that. The inference of all the SOPs is that as home inspectors, it's not our job to know what's acceptable in the code throughout the history, but only what something that is significantly deficient or unsafe in the present. If something is not functioning as intended, unsafe, or poses an unreasonable risk to people, it's a defect. It's not always code issues. Sometimes things we find is workmanship or imperfections in design. This is a bathroom that the toilet, you could not shut the toilet room door when the main bathroom door was shut. They would hit. So you would have to shut one or the other first. Non-code issue is top and bottom edges of the doors are not painted. This is a warranty type thing. It printed. Most all the door manufacturers say that if they're not painted, avoid the warranty. Is anybody writing that up? I'm sure that most people don't. It's you probably could make a case that it's cosmetic. I usually point it out because it does affect the warranty of the door. Builders hate me for it, actually. Some builders do it. I find that the same builders don't do it, and some builders do it. So
is that an interior or an exterior?
That's an interior door. But you can see it's printed right on there. It's it's voids the warranty if it's not painted. This is the new house. Would you report that as a substandard workmanship or an imperfection or a fault? And I don't know if you can tell, but the rake trim at the top and at the bottom had a very different profile than the section in the middle. And this is a brand new house. It's actually here it was actually in the East End near the airport where I took this photo. Would you report that on a new construction? See what I'm saying? It's down here. It's that profile. Then it turns into almost a flat deep profile. Then up here it turns into a heavier profile. I actually pointed this out to the project manager, and I said, "Why?" And he says, "I have no idea." So would you guys report that? I mean, I'm just curious. Would you? I mean, would you report it as a defect or would you just put it as like an informational type thing and leave it up to the, yeah, I mean, I could see that, but the way I look at it, if it's a new house, I wouldn't be happy with it if I was buying it. So I always point stuff like that out. So this is a new construction. They've got the downspout over top of the inlet that's going under the ground. So when it's raining, I was there when it was raining, so you can clearly see that the water is just pouring out right there, right down beside the foundation, and it's already dug it out. Um, would you report it as a poor workmanship, or would you make it a defect, or yeah, it's just poor workmanship. Let's talk about liability. And I actually chatted with Larry about this. Are building code officials or municipal code inspectors liable for missing something? What do you guys think? Unless there's malfeasance, they're immune from lawsuits, and that Larry actually confirmed that. So basically, it has to be some sort of a negligence, or I think there's some other stipulations that Larry said, but that's basically what it means. Are we as home inspectors? I mean, and again, whether it's intentional or not, uh, we pretty much have targets on our backs, and I can tell you, I some kind of way, and I don't do it on purpose, but I get drug into legal stuff, probably because there's some attorneys around that know that I'll do it. I've been involved in uh, four home inspector cases, and just recently I just got out of one because they settled it, which I'm so fortunate because will be a jury trial, which I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes. Since the 1990s, and I think I'm correct on that, Larry, there's been codes that require receptacles in crawl spaces to have GFCI protection. This is a new construction, and you see me putting my tester on and testing it. It had no GFCI protection. The code changed in 2018 that require that even the lighting outlets had GFCI protection. This one had no GFCI at all in the crawl space. Target on the back. Remember that. New home. This is actually a short video. It had no GFCI protection in the bathroom, and when I'm showing the video, I want you to look where they have the HVAC register. Oh, I didn't play the video. Sorry. I don't know why, but anyway, there's no GFCI protection. They had an HVAC register in the floor that you had to step over to get into the shower. And I wrote it up, told them that I thought it was a really bad idea. And of course, they told me the county had approved it. And I said, that's still a bad idea. And surprisingly, the builder actually fixed it. I actually did a recheck and they moved it. I'm sorry, my video don't play, but they had no GFCI in the bathroom. This is a new home. It's a 1-year warranty inspection. That's the garage wall over to the railing going into the house, up the steps to the house. It's measuring 27 inches. Is that acceptable? Would you agree with that, Larry? Not acceptable?
30.
Yeah. Should it have passed the final? This was, again, 1-year warranty inspection. It shouldn't have passed. That's what the code basically says. It's basically a good rule to remember. It's basically the size of a refrigerator, 30 inches side to side and 36 inches out. That's that's the illustration that actually shows in the code. Little quick story about this is my client calls me and says, the builder says he's not fixing it because the county approved it. And I said, okay. I said, let me make a call. So I called, it was Henrico County, and I actually know a couple inspectors in Henrico. I know a few in Chesterfield and know one in Hanover. I called the inspector that does the electrical inspections, and he told me to send him a photo. So I sent him that photo, and he says, he asked me for the address, and I hung the phone up, and it's probably 30 minutes. My client says, I don't know what you did, but the builder just said he's coming over to take care of that. So evidently, the electrical inspector called the builder and said they had to fix it. Does that sound reasonable, Larry?
Yeah, I was gonna say, quite often what happens is the electrical inspector will come through before that landing and that steps and that guardrail that are put up. So when they measure,
Yeah,
probably 30 or more. When you and I come back to, all of that stuff has been done.
Yeah.
Now, but again, since it's a code violation, the locality has the authority to go back and say, now you have to fix it.
yeah. So irregular stairs is a very common thing that I find on new construction, and it's a potential liability. I was actually involved in a lawsuit where it was a landlord owned the house and he was renting it out, and they fell down the steps, and the attorney was trying to make a big issue that the stairs won't correct. So it can happen. So pay attention to this stuff. The code in Virginia says, well, the one thing I want to point out here is that the code in Virginia is different than what it shows in the IRC and in the Maryland code. The Maryland code and the IRC says 7 3/4 on risers. The Virginia code, and I think it's also in the North Carolina code, it's actually 7 1/4, 8 1/4. And they can't be, the tallest riser can't be different from the other risers by 3/8 of an inch. This was an added piece, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct on that, Larry, is that it was added, they added a little section that says how the risers can be sloped. So this is a new house. This was actually in New Kent County. It measured 8.5 inches. And the other steps were, I think, within the normal range, but is 8.5 okay? Is that an acceptable safe step? Is it allowed in Virginia? No, Virginia says 8 1/4 max. So this was a townhouse in west end of Henrico, that brand new townhouse, and it had 4 levels. And I found this on several of the stairs that went up, but they were always at the landing, which is where I commonly find them. But the one of them measured 7 7/8, and the ones below that were 7 1/8. That's 3/4 of an inch difference. So remember, the greatest riser height can't exceed the smallest more than 3/8 of an inch. And the 3/8 of an inch is kind of a universal thing. IRC, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina. What's the maximum allowed difference between risers? You can look at that photo and see that they're wrong. So the bottom riser was measuring 7. The middle one was 5 1/4, and the top one to the inside floor is 4. I've heard different things, and maybe Larry can maybe shed some light on this, but I've heard that you measure to the inside the floor, which is what I usually do, and then I've also heard people say that you measure to the threshold. Any comments on
Top
that?
of the threshold.
Top of the threshold.
Highest point of the threshold.
Okay.
And where some builders get themselves in trouble is you've got doors that have adjustable thresholds.
Yeah.
And so when the carpenter is there to put the steps and landing in, the door hasn't been adjusted. But when we come along to our inspection, they're ready for the CO and turn it over. All of that punch work has been done. So now the threshold has been adjusted so that the door closes and seals, and it's different than what the carpenter measured.
So John, when you talk about Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, where is that coming from that they're different? What
Well, Virginia says 8.25, the risers.
Virginia says that where?
In the code, Virginia code.
In the Virginia code.
It's different in Maryland and IRC. North Carolina says the same thing as Virginia.
John, if I may interject, remember I said in my presentation, there's a difference between a Dillon rule state, which is what Commonwealth of Virginia is, and a home rule state. Mm. Home rule states generally adopt the code right when it comes off the printing press. Maryland is a home rule state. Okay. So they don't generally amend the code like we do in Virginia.
Okay.
And so that may be why you're having a difference between Maryland and Virginia.
Yeah.
At one point, North Carolina used to have their own code. And I think over the past several years or cycles, Carolina has gotten on board with supposedly the rest of the nation, and now they've adopted either the IRC or some amended version like Virginia does.
Well, I just built a deck in North Carolina last summer, and I wish I could have more time to talk on that because there's significant differences that they want down there than they are here in Virginia, but that's a topic. It's a big topic. So here's an outside porch, and that's actually the writing on my report. That's actually some snips out of my report. So the step risers went from 7 inches to 8 inches. They were an inch out of level. You can see my level there on the right lower. It's an inch out of level. And you can't have that much out of level because it's not safe. And you can't have that much difference between the steps. It's just unsafe. It could cause somebody to get hurt and you'd be liable, possibly. So the code is different also on treads. The IRC in Maryland is the tread can be a minimum of 10 inch, has to be minimum of 10 inch. In Virginia, it's 9 inch. Same thing in North Carolina. And of course, the variance or the difference between the smallest and the widest treads can't be more than 3/8 of an inch. This is a new construction. Before I tell you, well, when I got to this house, this is a 1-year warranty inspection. The very first thing the homeowner told me was that something's not right with the steps. He and his wife had both fallen down the steps. And I said, well, let me measure this because, I don't like routinely go around. I mean, I do routinely measure steps, but I probably would have missed this, to be honest with you, because I didn't pay attention to it until they said that. But I measured it. Anyway, the measurement is again, it's 9 inches in Virginia, 10 inches everywhere else. But you have to measure from the horizontal leading edge, which is why I have my yellow stick ruler sticking down and measuring out. So it's measuring 8.5. It's just not a safe step tread. I don't know what they did about that. I meant to call and ask them about what they did about it, but I haven't called.
Question.
Yep.
This is Dan over here. The carpet on that last. Did you hear that microphone on? I think so. Yes. There you go. Can you hear me? Did the carpet change the whole profile of the safety and the?
I know what you mean, but I actually was very meticulous about trying to figure out if the carpet was. It was just not. It was just wide enough. No matter how I measured it, I was still getting 8.5.
I've seen safety issues. Mother-in-law, 90+ years old, carpeting, safety hazard.
Yeah.
So it was just carpeting. I wonder can mess people up.
Yeah. Well, these were not old people. These were young people, but they said they had both fallen down the steps. And just pointed out to you, pay attention to this stuff because you could be on the wrong end of a suit. we should all know what the acceptable safe standard is on railings. This is a illustration that I grabbed out of off the internet. I think it's out of the code check 20. It's based on 2021 IRC, but we should be somewhat familiar with what these rules are. So which it jumps me into something that you probably don't see a lot of, but I think you will start seeing more and more of it. These railings that are either tubes or cables. And the same rules apply to these these horizontal tubes and horizontal cables. You still have to be able to maintain those 4-inch space between them. And you can't, and on stairs, it can be as much as 4 3/8. Same rules apply. Pay attention to these cables because a lot of times they're not very tight. And there's certain tensions they say they're supposed to be on. I don't get into like the nuts and bolts of how strong. I just kind of use a common sense approach. And if it feels loose, I write it up. Yep.
Those are horizontal railings that are not safe because kids can climb over them and fall through the hole. Do you call those out?
And Larry, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the code used to say you can't have climbable railings, but it doesn't say that anymore. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. The only climbable requirements now are in the code regarding barriers for pools, horizontal members and spacing, but there's nothing in the guardrail section that says that you can't have that or that you have to prevent climbability.
I mean, you will see this in upper end type houses. I've seen it a couple times.
So if you're taken into court and you can't refer to the code, can you use the code to defend you since you didn't call that out?
That's a very good question because I've been in court and the judge has looked at me on a witness stand and said, "Is that the code?" And it's a tricky thing because you don't supposed to cite code, but if you're in front of a judge, I'm probably going to kind of skirt around it a little bit and say, "Well, I don't supposed to cite code, but yeah, it is in the code," that sort of thing. But a couple of things that I've learned about this recently is that these cable railing systems, there's lots of different manufacturers, but I've learned that most of them are saying 4-foot maximum spacing between the posts. I think I did see one that was 42. But 4 foot's probably a good rule of thumb. So if they're spaced further apart, you probably should make note of that or pay attention to it and see how tight they feel. Post-to-post spacing, it still has to be able to prevent that ball or that spear from going through. This is actually wording right out of the manufacturer's instructions, and that's their illustration. So this is on cable. And then, of course, that one says 42 inches. So I have a picture of one in a minute that was actually 5 foot. My understanding is, and Larry, maybe you can shine some light on this, is that ball rule or that spear rule is not a test under load rule. That's my understanding of it. But it's just, to me, it's common sense that if you can easily get a 4-inch ball or 4-inch, my hand is, about 4 inches. If I can easily get it through there, it's probably not functioning as they should. Is that sound?
That's correct. Not under load. It's just, it is what it is.
So that's what you're trying to prevent. You're trying to prevent, somebody from getting through those railings, like a kid getting hurt, falling through. This house right here was a house in Henrico County, very upper end type home. This was a 1-year warranty inspection. My client pointed out to me when I got there that he was very concerned that his kids could get their bodies through those. These are not cables, these are tubes. And he was not comfortable with it. And I looked into it. It's actually hard to find any specs on it, but I did find a few things that said, they can't be more than 4 foot apart. I actually brought this to the attention of Henrico County because I actually know the supervisor that's there, Richard Moore, fairly well. And he took great interest in it. He actually, he's asked me about it a couple of times because he's trying to figure out if they're fixing it. Well, the builder supposedly is agreed that they need to be fixed, but they have been dragging their feet for like 6 or 8 months. But the homeowner keeps me informed of what's going on, but supposedly the builder has agreed it's not right and they're going to have it fixed, but they're just dragging their feet. So pay attention to these tube type. They're basically just long aluminum tubes. I guess they're aluminum. They feel like aluminum. Again, these horizontal round bars or tube railings. Some of the manufacturers specify that depending on the how far you got those post spaced is how close you have to have those tubes apart because of the flexibility of them. And so just kind of keep that. And it's different on the incline or stair type. So this is just one manufacturer. There's a couple manufacturers that I could find, but they were real vague about everything. This is just my hand easily just going right in. And I kind of see if I have my hand spread out like that. It's just real flimsy, flexible. And you can see how far of a drop it is. Any comments on that, Larry? Yep.
Yeah, back to that under load question. If you can do that, I would be inclined to believe that you could probably also shake, rattle, and roll that, which means it's not installed properly, meaning not per the manufacturer's installation instructions.
Yeah.
So that would be an indicator to an inspector. Well, let me check further to see what the spacing of the posting is, the support post, whatever. And like we mentioned in you and I talked about in our conversation, the code is going to direct you to the manufacturer's installation instructions. So in Chesterfield County, when we encounter that, we're just going to straight up ask for those manufacturer's installation instructions, then do our inspection based upon what that literature says. But if you can do that, I would be willing to bet that it hasn't been installed properly because you're not going to get the proper load, the 200-pound lateral pressure.
Yeah. It's difficult to know the specifications unless you know who the manufacturer is. And the homeowner did not know, and the builder would not agree to tell me that. So, so anyway. Some of the manufacturers say no greater than 4 feet. These were 5 foot. Some say the rods can be closer together depending on the distance that the posts are apart. They usually say they have to go into, if it's a wood post, it has to go into the post 1/2 inch deep, and these were probably not a 1/2 inch, and they have to be glued, and they definitely won't glued. I could spin them. So now we're to move. Anybody questions on the railing? All right, so this is a new construction, and Larry, you actually might have been involved in this because I think this was a big deal. This was a house in Chesterfield that I actually got tired of counting how many of the truss hinges, the hinge truss gusset plates were loose and falling apart and bent. But I found out later there was 32 of them. And I know they got the county involved. The client, I think the client got the county involved, but they did fix this, I'm told. I didn't go back for a recheck, but you can see up there, it's right there where it's 32 of them like that. And this one here was just bent. This was a different house, but the truss had actually come down and the gusset plate was down below So it's completely failed. Just a kind of a point thing that I want to point out to you. I actually got this from an engineer at Virginia Tech, that once those things come loose, it's not a matter of just nailing them. That's beyond just nailing them back. He told me that they're pulled loose, they have to be engineered back together. So however the engineer says they're to be fixed.
One of those repairs took a 4x3 sheet of plywood on both sides with over 60 fasteners to repair.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they think they can just
hammer it back in place.
So this is I actually, this was the first time I'd ever seen this type of truss system, but this was a new construction, and they had these little grooves cut in them. Anybody ever seen those before? You seen them? Anybody? This is the first time I'd ever seen them. I can't even remember what builder it was, but they had drilled holes all in the top plates or top of the trusses. This is a floor structure. You can't, the manufacturers also have illustrations and publications that you can't notch drill trusses unless it's approved by an engineer or that sort of thing. I'm hoping my video will play on this. There you go. So this was a new construction. They had already issued the CO, and you can see they have a hole in that gas fan, direct vent type of system, and they got a hole in it. Everybody see that? They were moving in like the next day. So, but I did report this. I did do a recheck, and they did fix it. So this was a 1-year warranty inspection. I'm hoping that my video will play. It's not. So I don't know why some of the videos played out, but anyway, this is a video. But basically, they never hooked up the flue pipe. It was actually going through the roof, but the section between the roof and the furnace was not installed. And it's not this particular house, but I actually had one other time. I actually had a client that his realtor had told him that it was no need to get a home inspection on a new house. And he found this, well, I actually found this after a year. He wanted to sue the realtor and asked me what I thought about it. And I said, you need to talk to an attorney. But he was just so mad at the realtor for that. He felt like it endangered his family. But anyway, that's the flue pipe's never connected. According to Inspector Pro Insurance, an article that they published a few years back, the top 5 claims made against home inspectors each year is water damage, roof, foundation, mold, and plumbing. Top 5 claims made against home inspectors per the insurance company that does the E&O. Let me see if my video is going to play. There you go. This was a new construction house in Powhatan County. This builder actually is an upper end type builder. It's not. This was a custom home, and I actually thought the house was great. The problem was he had told the buyer, my client, that he didn't need to get a home inspection done, that he was a custom builder, and that he, put pride in his work, blah, blah, blah. When I found this, he actually got out of the contract. He said he felt like he just didn't trust the builder anymore. So he actually bought another house because I did another inspection for him. I thought it was an overkill. I mean, I thought this was just an honest mistake, but it basically turned him completely against the builder. But again, plumbing, mold, that sort of thing, top 5 claims against home inspectors, and it can happen on new construction. This is a photo that I took years ago, actually in the city of Richmond, on a new construction. This was a small builder, and he was grumbling. This has been a long time ago. It's probably been 10, 12, 15 years ago. He was grumbling that home inspectors, blah, 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 Anyway, I crawl in the crawl space and they never connected the drain right there to the drain that's supposed to be coming down here. So water was just pouring out when they were upstairs running some water. The builder got so mad he actually left. He was there. He got so mad when I told him that. Never made it to the right place. Another video that I hope plays. Yeah, there you go. Cut joist. And watch the slope of this drain. I stayed a little too long there. And watch this drain. It goes uphill before it goes back out. So it's gonna have a hard time flowing downhill, right?
Question.
Yep.
Have you seen any statistics such that number of defects per new home built? You know, in the auto industry, they used to calculate defects as a function of Monday versus Friday, Wednesday being fewer defects than, say, Friday afternoon. Have you ever seen statistics like that for the home building industry?
No, I haven't.
Wouldn't that be?
It would be. I don't have a slide on it, but I was just going to point out something that I just thought about it. But those, those plastic straps there are only rated for, I think, 15 pounds. So you have to also think about that. If you don't look like it has enough straps, because if one breaks, sometimes they'll all break because they're only rated for 15 pounds. I actually had an architect tell me that, so I learned that from an architect. So here's a new construction, and this was actively leaking, but you can see that it has a crack right there. I was a little puzzled on how this would happen, but I have a friend that's a plumber that does new construction, and he told me that probably what happened was they have those flanges that come with the solid piece in them. And he said that the plumber who'd set the toilet probably took a hammer and hit it too hard and cracked it. That was his guess.
John,
Yep.
Did you actively pull the insulation down to check that, or was there some reason for checking it?
It was a puddle of water under it.
On the vapor barrier?
Yeah, and the insulation was wet too. So this is, again, remember, top 5 claims made against home inspectors: plumbing, water damage, probably mold. This probably is all the above. This was a 1-year warranty inspection, and I can't remember what county it was, but I think it was New Kent. But it was actively leaking as a tile shower, and it can happen. So just pay attention to it. The interesting thing was the homeowner had been fussing about the quality of the tile in the shower, and when I found this, she said, "Well, I know they're going to replace it now." So one of the top 5 claims against home inspectors: mold. It's a touchy topic. I mean, I know home inspectors sometimes have really strong opinions about this. You can see where I took my finger and wrote mold. I found it in new construction. Actually, I had one in not too far from here in Gloucester County one time that was, the whole crawl space was like that and worse. And the builder got so mad, he told me to get off the property, and if I ever came back, he'd have me arrested for trespassing. And but it was terrible. It was really bad. It's important to note is that I know some of you guys are Virginia inspectors, some are Maryland online, I'm sure. I don't know if we have any from other states, but in Virginia, if you're not going to cover mold, the regulations say you have to have it excluded in your contract. So remember that if you're not going to cover mold, you have to have it excluded in your contract. That's a Virginia regulation that it's going to be enforced if it comes to, you know, into light.
That raises a question though, if I'm not certified to identify mold specifically, then I use generic terms like growth or fungi.
Yeah.
Is that the approach?
I'm going to show you a statement here in just a second, but while you're talking about that, I'm going to tell you that there was an inspector in Virginia that I wasn't directly involved in the case, but he got a complaint from a builder to DPOR because he had identified mold in a crawl space, and it was the investigator basically made him show that he had some qualifications to talk about mold, and they were after him basically for a sanction, but it ended up in the end of it, he didn't get sanctioned. He didn't get, nothing happened, but he did get questioned about it. So it can happen. My opinion is what it's worth. I think home inspectors are just as qualified as a termite inspector to identify mold, and they do it all the time. Now, are we as qualified as somebody that is certified like Bill Wilmoth? No.
But to use the term mold suggests I'm an expert enough to identify it from.
I don't use that word, but I'm going to show you what I would recommend in just a second.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, guys, there's no regulation in Commonwealth of Virginia that stipulates you have to be certified to be a mold inspector. The only certification there is and will be is going to be remediation. And there will be a very, very specific certification that you have to be a remediator for mold. You might not hear me, I'm sure we have time. Just hold it.
Okay.
Everybody here.
Yeah. I can't. I don't want to get too far off on this mold because it's a big topic.
Yes, I just wanted to slightly interject to it because both you and I have talked about it many times,
Yeah.
John.
So in North Carolina, I like this statement. This is the reason I'm sharing it with you. In North Carolina, if you talk about mold or fungus in your report, this is a suggested statement. Originally, I thought it was a mandatory statement, but I just confirmed yesterday that it's actually not mandatory. It's a suggested statement. It's published by their board down there. And I've actually talked to people that do mold remediation. They all seem to like this statement. So I think it's a good statement. It basically conveys what you're trying to say and also sort of protects you from being liable if you're wrong. But if you want to take a picture of that or something, but I think it's a good statement. Foundation is one of the top 5 claims made against home inspectors. This is a new house. I was actually there. I wasn't doing the whole house. I was actually there sort of as a specialty type thing. I was looking for something else in the crawl space and just ran across this.
John, before you move on real quick,
Yep.
People are asking where you got that statement, that North Carolina statement.
The North Carolina board, which I think is through the fire marshals and insurance or something, their board is different than Virginia. They publish a bunch of statements. They have a statement that they recommend that inspectors use. It's they have one on mold, they have one on polybutylene, one on aluminum wiring, stone. There's a bunch of statements they recommend.
Can you push the back button?
Huh?
Push the back button.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
There you go.
Right there. I'm sorry.
No,
there you go.
No, that one right there. Yeah. I think somebody online wanted to do a screen capture there.
Okay. I use this statement often. I don't always use it, but I use it often. So this is a video showing a broken out pier. It'll eventually get to it. I'm sorry. I should speed up my video and a little more. there's a broken out pier that, and you can tell by the spacing of the others that that's necessary. So again, foundations are one of the top 5 claims, and they can have issues in new construction. Here's another one that's, this house was 6 months old. I was there doing an inspection, and that pier actually has split, and they were going out like this. Everybody, any questions on that?
What was above it? The piano?
I don't know. I don't remember. So roof is another one of the top 5 claims against home inspectors. I want to point out to you that a lot of times these dormer that they put on roofs like that, they're not a minimum of 412, which if it's, I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of this, but if the shingle roof is between 212 and 412, it has to have either a water and ice shield, or it has to have 2 layers of felt paper. You don't have to have it if it's over 412. But a lot of times these are 312, 212, 312, something like that. That's me checking it in my little handy level, what do you call it? It's telling me that's a 312 pitch. And when I looked under the shingles, it's just nothing but felt paper. It's not water and ice shield. It's not 2 layers. I find that to be the case in a lot of those low slope dormers. This is a new roof, and this is not something that is like, I shouldn't say this is common, but this is what is like the extreme end of it. Exposed nails everywhere. You can't have exposed nails. They're all leak potentials. This is another common thing, that the butt joints in a shingle roof, they cannot be, this one is measured 3 3/4. The rule of thumb is if it's 3 or less, it's a potential for a leak. It really should be more like 6, but they can't be close together like that. That's an error in the installation. The whole roof basically needs to be replaced, basically. The manufacturers all have these illustrations where they show how they're supposed to be installed, and you notice that bottom one here is 6 inches. So 6 inches would be the minimum that it should be. I don't get excited unless it's less than 4. I don't like anything less than 4. It's a leak potential. Of course, the steeper it is, the less likely it'll happen, but the shallower it is, the more likely it'll happen.
Stack ones, you pull them out.
When they don't stagger them like that, I do if I notice it. Yeah. It's not. The manufacturers don't say you can do it that way. You're talking about stair step type thing. Yeah. It says you shouldn't do that. This one is 2.5. Again, it's not acceptable. The installation instructions says 6 inches minimum. The leak potential is high when it has that, so you got to remember that. This is, I think it was the same roof, actually. They had nails between the butt joints. That's not allowed. That's a leak potential. This is the sort of thing, it's not going to leak right away. It's going to leak probably when the builder is off the hook down the road, 4 or 5 years, 10 years, it'll leak. I actually did they actually got a new roof at this house, by the way. Here's one that they didn't stagger the starter strips. The starter shingles have to be on the bottom. They have to be staggered. And this is why they have to be staggered, because that felt paper, which they don't have water and ice shield, the felt paper in 10 years, the sun is going to be completely deteriorated that, and it's going to leak. It just has to be staggered basically to prevent that. Again, it's not going to leak while the house is still under warranty with the builder. It's going to leak down the road, and then they'll say, Mr. Inspector, why didn't you tell me this was wrong? Because the roofers will come along and say, well, your inspector should have told you that. You know, you guys know that, right? So here's a new construction. They've got OSB exposed. You know, it's just wrong. It's just bad workmanship. How about that one? That one should be okay, right? It's going to rot and leak into the eave. A lot of times these area right here above this where this lip is, they don't seal it and it's wide open. It's hard to see from the ground, but a lot of times there's no caulk. Water leaks right into the eave. Fortunately, it doesn't usually show up in the house, but if there's wood framing there, it'll rot it out over time. A lot of the new houses, the upper end ones anyway, or condos, townhouses have these little flat balcony roofs. Common materials they use is Deck Tech and Duradeck. They have multicolored patterns in them. You familiar with them? Everybody seen those? Looks like vinyl flooring or something. The common two names, I probably Deck Tech is probably the more common, but there's also one called Duradeck. They're very commonly, they all have to be, the manufacturer says they have to be a quarter inch and 12. That one right there at the top left was measuring 1/4 and 48. That's my 4-foot level. And it's just not adequate. It has to be sloped so that water runs off of it. This was actually a 1-year warranty inspection, and the homeowner was actually, that was one of their complaints, is that it holds water all the time. And I was trying to take a picture of the water standing under that chair, but didn't come out very well. But it's required to have a slope so that it drains dry. There's the installation instruction for Deck Tech. For every 4 feet, has to have 1 inch of drop. And remember, the one I had was for every 4 feet, it was 1/4 an inch. So it's 3/4 an inch out. So again, you make sure that these little balconies are sloped so they drain. You will probably find that they're not. I usually find that they're not sloped properly. I'd say more often than not. This is the Duradeck. The earlier one I showed you was Deck Tech. This is Duradeck. They say the same thing. Has to have 1/4 inch fall and 12. So keep an eye out for that. This was a 1-year warranty inspection, and they actually had a leak. And I came up with, I think this is where it was leaking. It was a pretty flat roof to start with, but that little area right there, I could see wood. And I think water was just running in, leaking inside the house, but right below that was a place in the wall.
Okay, let's see if this works any better.
We good?
Sounds good.
All right, good. Got Larry Ciro online. I'm nervous now because he's been around forever.
He's old.
So this was when they were in the process of repairing it. You can see how a little bit of a tape they had on the where it was taped to the siding, and it was just basically leaking right in under it, and it gets house into a door, which most times it's a balcony roof, so it's usually going to have a door. And I have found leaky doors on new construction a few times. So pay attention to that. Look for stains under the door. This is a 1-year-old house. 1-year-old house has water damage around the window from the inside. I didn't have a photo of it, but in that photo, you probably can't tell, but can you see something wrong? So the weep holes are on the side. This was like a four windows up. It was from the bottom. It was basically a wall of windows. All the other ones were okay, except the ones on the very top were basically had the weep holes on the side, and water was leaking around the windows right in here from the inside. And the builder had been there several times trying to figure it out. And when I saw those weep holes, I said, well, did they say anything about the weep holes being wrong? And the lady said, no, they didn't say anything about that. I said, well, that's probably why it's leaking. But anyway, they end up having to fix that. Here's one that's the weep holes are up. It's pointing to the sky. Again, the weep holes have to be on the bottom for them to function. Everybody can see that in the photo? This was a new construction on a lake, and all four of these windows right here. This is a 1-year warranty inspection, by the way. It's all four of these were leaking. That's where they were leaking. Right there, right there. All four of them were leaking. So they had to fix that. This is what happens when windows leak. Over time, it can cause big problems. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about stone because I see a lot of issues with stone. It's also called lumpy stucco. Does anyone exclude it from your inspection? After we talk, you're probably gonna be thinking about that. Are you describing it in your report that visual defects may not show symptoms for years? Because it's not going to show symptoms for a long time usually.
I just write on there, you need a mason to inspect it. All of it.
Yeah.
Because 90%, I watched a video once that said 90% of that stuff is installed incorrectly.
I got a slide on that actually, but I don't think I will agree with the mason. I think you need to have somebody who is certified to do stone inspections. There's very few people. I'm actually one of them. Stanley is probably the best around. Stanley Uskowski. You've probably heard of him. But he's the guy I call to ask questions about it. There was going to be a guy online that Mark Perley is another expert in it, and I do call him to ask questions about it too. He's actually one of the instructors at the EDI, which is the Exterior Design Institute, that I got my certification through. Orlean stone veneer probably tops my list as being one of the more common than not having issues. Cliff Capson, which is probably the article you was talking about, he's a guy out in Chicago that does a lot of stone inspections and EIFS inspections. Actually, he hired me one time to do a EIFS inspection in Roanoke. And he does, says he does about 250 inspections a month because he has a network of people. And more than 90% of them are not installed in accordance with the National Concrete Masonry Association, 90%. So here's a photo courtesy of Mike Bryan, where a guy is putting a stone in. And this is probably a nitpicky thing, and I'm not really sure the reason for it, but if you notice that they've got the scratch coat vertical, the manufacturer's instruction always says to do the scratch coat horizontally. So that's wrong right away. Here's the manufacturer's instructions. It says that the scratch coat has to be 1/2 inch thick, and then scored horizontally. And then when you butter or batter the stone to stick it on, it's supposed to be another 1/2 inch, which means 1/2 inch is supposed to be 1 inch of mortar between the back of that stone and the wall. most of the time it's not there. It's hard to tell. I mean, I grant that it's just really hard to tell sometimes, but you can really tell if one of the stones has popped off, because a lot of times you'll see that. But if a stone's popped off, you can usually tell how thick it is. Does that picture on the right look like it's a 1/2 inch thick scratch coat? No, you can still see the lath and still see holes in it where it's missing mortar. Again, that's a photo courtesy of Mike Bryan. This is an illustration out of the National Concrete Masonry Association. That right there is usually not done. Backer rod and sealant right there. Rarely is done. So it's required by the manufacturer's instructions.
John, isn't there a new product that's not shown in that drawing where there's something that
Yeah,
in place of
yeah,
the backer rod?
I'm trying to think of the name of it now. It's a I might have no, I can't think of the name of it, but it is. It's a little vinyl strip that, white color. It's sometimes it's beige, but the key with that is they also supposed to be sealed or caulked, and they rarely are. So it's either the backer rod or the easy bead. That's what the word I'm looking for. It's called easy bead. The easy bead is supposed to be sealed too, and it's usually not. More from the capstone article that was in some magazine said the biggest problems is missing kickout flashing and Mr. Backer rod and sealant joints around windows. Capstone said so most of the time they butt it right up against a window. Technically not right. Again, if you compare this photo over here to that backer rod and sealant joint, it's just, you can actually see the metal lath back there. That's just technically not right. It's this is the sort of thing you should be paying attention to as home inspectors. You can't do a thorough inspection, but you can write up stuff like this because it's not right. Manufacturer guidelines requires 4-inch off the soft grade and 2-inch off of pavement. Commonly, it's not there.
John, can you take a look at the screen in front of you there?
Yep.
No, this one down here.
No, it's not.
No, this one down here.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. That's a different photo.
That's that easy bead we're talking about.
Oh yeah, yes, that's it. That's it.
Oh, they can't see that, can they?
No.
The people in, but is that? Let me see if I can.
Online, we're seeing a white wall to the right, a stone wall to the left.
Yeah. So they're seeing it online. There you go. So yeah, there's an easy bead. There's it's kind of a vinyl strip. It's usually a white or tan color. And it's in place of the backer rod, but they're supposed to be sealed also. If you look at the manufacturer's instructions, it says to seal it.
So there should be not only that, but also a bead of caulk.
It's supposed to be sealant, usually it's a clear sealant. All right. It's supposed to be a clearance grade. I see this enforced in different areas more so than other areas. And I don't see it, no disrespect to Larry there, but I don't usually see it enforced in Chesterfield and Henrico County. You never ever see it on the ground. They enforce it strictly. But it's supposed to be a clearance. And before I forget to tell you, because I may forget to tell you, I actually was talking to one of the more reputable contractors in Richmond, and he told me that was a big deal because water soaks in and soaks up the wall. He told me that is a big deal not to let it go. This is from James River Exteriors, which is probably one of the more reputable companies. Again, it can't be embedded in asphalt like I see. It can't be below grade. That's technically wrong. Don't supposed to be like that. Shouldn't be buried in the ground like that. Yep. No, I can't hear it.
Okay. A question with this picture, maybe you're going to address it already, but I've been having a war with builders for probably 3 or 4 years about that transition between siding.
Yeah, I've got a slide on it.
Good.
Wrong. This one, you see where I dug down. I was trying to see how deep it was going, and I actually just got tired of trying to dig with my hand. But it, it was definitely embedded in the dirt. Again, it's supposed to be 4-inch above grade. This is probably what you're talking about, Mike. It's actually your photo. You see these gaps and voids in the flashing between the transition between the siding and the stone cap. Nothing gonna keep water from getting right in that.
Well, and actually, in my opinion, where that flashing meets that sill, all the way the length of the building should be sealed.
Yeah.
Because you've just directed all the water out from behind the siding, and now you're saying, but enter here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have
that one does it.
I have that slide you sent me, Mike. So this is another photo from Mike. It's big void in between the flashing and the water gets right in. This is the installation instructions from the National Concrete Masonry Association. By the way, if you look at the stone manufacturers, like, there's a different brand, they always say, they refer to the National Concrete Masonry Association. They always say that they recommend following that guideline. But you look real close, it says flashing and bedding sealant under flashing. It is never done. I mean, very rarely do I ever see it. Most times, if you lift that flashing up, you just see wood. It's never done. And the bad thing about it is that capstone is usually not sloped. It's usually flat. So nothing will keep water from getting right in. Here's here's a photo that I got permission from this guy to use because he had a really good photo of it. And I did ask him for permission. He said yes. But this is a good illustration on what can happen when you don't have that flashing transition correct. Water gets in and wets that sheathing back there, and then over time you got rot, mold, that sort of thing. Again, you can't have exposed lath and gaps. This is the easy bead that you was talking about, Hollis. It's and you're supposed to have that all supposed to be sealed. It's just that's basically just taking the place of the backer rod. This is another illustration where you come down and have a trim board, like a horizontal trim board, and it shows the flashing detail. And again, it says bedding under flashing. So seal under flashing. More from the caption. He says, we're looking at new homes 2 to 3 years old, and we're not getting elevated moisture readings. But the same home in 10 to 14 years is going to have moisture and damage issues. And their experience is that it's not a question of defects or resultant damage, but when. The certification class that I took, they said that they think this is going to be huge in the future, like EIFS, probably worse, because they say it's just not being installed properly. So here's a home that I was going to just kind of give you it's almost like a case study, but this house was inspected by another inspector. He's an ASHI inspector, and my hat's off to him because he wasn't comfortable with the stone. So he told them that they should get me to come look at it because he wasn't comfortable with it. So anyway, I went out there and looked at it, new house, Chesterfield County. And it was all kinds of stuff wrong with it. And the stone was butted right up to the windows. You could see the little cracks in the joint there. It's just, not right. This is, whoops, I'm sorry. This is not right. Where's the 3/8 inch gap? It's supposed to be a backer rod or easy bead and sealant around the windows. No flashing above the windows. That's a tricky question. That's a tricky thing because sometimes the windows are have a different flashing detail that you can't see, but technically you're supposed to have a flashing detail between the stone and the window. You're never going to rarely see it. Here's the illustration now, the manufacturer's instructions. It says the head flashing here is supposed to be head flashing. Again, with backer rod and sealant, that's optional, but it does say bedding sealant under window fin. Again, here's the over here is backer rod and sealant around the window. It's clearly required. Everybody agree?
So where is the backer rod going? Is that filling space between the stone?
It's supposed to be
window?
a joint between windows or anything really. Any dissimilar material is supposed to be a joint, and the joint is really for two reasons. It's actually to prevent moisture from getting in, but it's also for expansion because the stone expands differently than the other materials. Got it? Yeah. So here's the same house. Where's the clearance at the roof? There's a requirement for stone to be off the roof. It's butted right up against basically. That's still on the right. That's on the left photo, and on the right photo, I'm looking under the flashing at the top of a wall. It's not here. It's actually another section, but I can see where they have behind stone. It has to have a double layer of water resistant barrier. I can see where the barrier stops right there. I can see where it stops. It stops right there. So it did not go all the way over. And that barrier also is supposed to be 6 inches above the siding. So that's an issue also. Again, the roof is supposed to have a 2-inch clearance. Does that right there look like a 2-inch clearance on the right there? You can also see the exposed lath. It's not no clearance. Had voids in the stone where I could see the lath right there. I can see the lath back there. This house actually it was kind of weird. They actually had the homeowners told me that they picked out a fully grouted stone at the showroom, but what they ended up with was about half of it was grouted and about half of it wasn't grouted. I could not find anything that said that was technically wrong, but to me, it's just common sense that it should be one way or the other. This is where a stone had popped off, and you can clearly see that it's nowhere near an inch of mortar or even a half-inch mortar behind the stone, which is probably why it popped off. Here's the illustrations out of the National Concrete Manufacturers Association. And I want to point this out to you because I'm going to talk to you in just a second about what an engineer was telling me about this. This illustration shows the stone doesn't have a weep screed, and notice that it says weep screed is optional, but it's all masonry, and it doesn't have the double layer of water resistant barrier. When there's a wood frame involved, the weep screed, you notice it doesn't say optional, and it shows 2 layers of water and ice shield. I mean, I'm sorry, the waterproof. The water resistant barrier shows 2 layers. This detail here shows that when you're coming down over top of a foundation, this is kind of where you get the argument that the foundation is not wood. The manufacturer's instructions say when it goes down over a foundation, you have to have the flashing at the foundation, top of the foundation level. You can see that illustration clearly shows it right here. This is when it continues over top of a foundation. It has to have that flashing at the floor level. And this is showing it also that it has to have sealant under the flashing and that sort of thing. It has to have a weep screed. All these things are not optional. And I'm making this a point because I'm going to just tell you in a minute about what this engineer was telling me about it. This detail, again, it shows you when it says, you know, foundation wall, when it continues down a foundation, this is what they're showing as what's required. This is usually not what you're going to see. I do see it sometimes, but usually you just see it go down to the ground. And sometimes they have a weep screed down there. Sometimes they don't, but usually it just stops and there's nothing like this most of the time.
John, you got under 10 minutes. There's 9 minutes.
All right. All right. So all these things I showed you, anybody want to guess on what the quote was to fix it? Because they actually had James River Exteriors come out and give them a quote. It was $4,800 to fix the things that I came up with. The builder's actually still arguing about this, actually, by the way. They actually want me to come meet the attorney, talk to him about it. But it's but the engineer, just to back up a little bit, the engineer, the homeowner got me to do the inspection. The builder hired an engineer that did a report, and the engineer, long story short, was the engineer basically said that everything I was saying was optional. They're not optional. The manufacturer doesn't say anything about optional except for it's all masonry. And so they asked me to respond to the engineer, which I usually don't do, but I knew he was wrong. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I actually wrote a report, basically said, and all due respect to the engineer, he's wrong. I said that the manufacturer's guidelines trump what he says, and they say it has to be this way. And anyway, it's may end up in court because they're asking me to go meet with the attorney, but it's not right. You can't, these things are not optional. They're mandated by the manufacturer.
Well, quick question. It seems to me that if I were going to recommend to a new home buyer, they should be saving the manufacturer's instructions for installation from each of the manufacturer materials in the house and demand those from the builder.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a great piece of advice from me, the consultant to the new home constructor buyer.
I think what happens is the builder hires this guy that does stone, and he's saying, yeah, it's right, it's okay, but they probably never even read the manufacturer's instructions. It's just.
So Tim Fisher, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. When the stone veneer continues down a foundation wall, and there's a weep screed in between, is that stone on the foundation wall allowed to touch the driveway or the ground, or does that still have to have the 2 and 4 inch gap?
If it's that transition, I wouldn't be concerned about it.
Okay.
Like I said,
I see that a lot. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
James River Exteriors, which is a very reputable contractor, big contractor, they specifically told me that they see a lot of moisture weeping up a wall because it's buried in dirt. And so if it's a transition there with flashing, I don't think it's going, I mean, it may weep to the flashing, but it should stop there. So I wouldn't be concerned about it.
Thank you.
So the point of it is that, you know, I really think we should be thinking about having some kind of disclaimer in your report, your contract, that you're not, like I hope that a lot of you guys do disclaim eaves, because you can't visually inspect it. I mean, you can visually see things that are not right, but you can't really visually inspect it.
So Shane, you got your hand up. Shane?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't get it unmuted. One of the things that we're finding a lot with the stone veneer is for the double layer of WRB, they're using tar paper. And they're claiming that that's fine. But I've had a number of clients that have hired me to come take a look at moisture issues, and it turns out when they pull everything off, that the moisture is getting in through the fasteners that goes between the tar paper to the OSB. So what happens is that's where the moisture is starting to go through. Is that? Have you seen anything with that, John?
I don't surprise me, but I'm just talking about the tar paper. Is there's the tar? It can look like tar paper, but it's called grade D. It's a better type of tar paper that's actually allowed to be part of the water resistant barrier. But it's not the tar paper that you buy at Lowe's. It's called grade D tar paper or grade D felt paper. I think we're running out of time, but what are we done? Okay. This is a statement that actually I got this from North Carolina also. They suggest this with adhered stone. So you might think about using something like this. Just to protect yourself because you don't ever know what's going to happen. I'm going to talk about this more later, but the case that I've got now they just settled it, but the inspectors did the inspection 3 years ago. So, and they were getting ready to sue him for $300,000. So I think we're going to run out of time, but the same thing goes with this brick. This is an illustration, the courtesy of Mike Bryan. These voids or gaps between the flashing transition to the between fiber cement siding and stone. They often have these gaps, and these Rolock bricks are flat, so water is going to easily get in. The illustration on the right there is an illustration that I got from the brick industry. It basically clearly says that it's supposed to be tilted, and it shows that there's sealant under the flashing, which is never done. Again, preformed flashing with sealant. This house I was called to because they were having leaks into the basement, and the builder was basically trying to blame it on something else. But I got there and I took when I got there, Servpro had actually been there, and they had cut out the drywall, and I see this little stain on the spray foam. We got 2 minutes, and so I knew that was probably water coming in. So I went outside and took that red bucket and I poured it right on that wall up there. And immediately, you can see the shiny there, immediately water ran into there. So, it's definitely was leaking right in under that flashing. Again, you have to have, this is a nice little illustration with Mike Bryan, but it has to have flashing. It has to have sealant under the flashing so that water cannot get in behind those bricks. This is a photo from Mike that he showed me that this was a new house, right, Mike? Water was getting under the windows because there's definitely no sealant, no flashing, no sealant. Again, you're supposed to have some sort of a way to keep water from getting in, but it was getting right in out of those windows. And this was where they brought the flashing out under the Rolock bricks. But under that area, if I understand Mike right, was that wall was wet, which indicates that water is getting in behind that window and running down into the foundation and wetting that wall. So water's getting in.
Typically, you see that behind the porch.
Yeah.
There was no porch there.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, got to have flashing and sealant. Again, this is not a new house, but I wanted to show you the results of this. Was actually a house on the it was a riverfront house, but the area, the side that faced the water inside the crawl space, that's the way it looked. All along the house on the riverside, water was getting in and staining the wood. I didn't find any rot, but it was definitely getting in. So it definitely can happen. I'm near the end, so this is a longer subject, but I can end here easily.